Welcome to the Daily Dose of Derm podcast, your go-to podcast for all things dermatology. I'm Dr. Mohiba Tareen, a board-certified dermatologist and the founder of Tareen Dermatology. Join us as we dive into the fascinating world of skincare, beauty, dermatologic treatment, and how to enter the world of derm. Whether you're a skincare enthusiast or an aspiring medical professional, this podcast is your daily dose of knowledge and inspiration. Get ready to uncover the secrets to healthy skin and discover how to make a meaningful impact in the field.
Welcome back to the Daily Dose of Derm. My name is Natalie Borer, and we have shifted our podcast series to something very exciting around financial health. And I am so excited to have a guest on today that is a giant in the industry of investing and cryptocurrency. He has been featured in many publications that a lot of you listeners have heard about: Forbes, Blockworks, TechCrunch, and more. He's an international speaker, and he is the CEO of Off the Chain Capital. It is my honor to introduce Brian Dixon. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Brian, I gave a little bit of a brief background on you, but can you please tell our listeners a little bit about how you got to where you are today and your interest in this field?
Absolutely. So I was very, very lucky, and I learned about Bitcoin in 2012 when I was finishing up law school. And I came across it. I read the initial white paper that came out that described what Bitcoin was, that Satoshi Nakamoto had created, who is the creator of Bitcoin. And I read it when I was in a law school class, not really paying much attention to what was going on in class.
Yep.
And I had this light bulb moment where I was like, this is really interesting. And so I read the white paper like 10 times over the course of a week.
Wow.
And then I went on the Bitcoin rabbit hole where I was reading as much as I could in Reddit forums or videos on YouTube. And there wasn't a lot of content out about it at that time because it was before the rest of the cryptocurrency market took off. It was Bitcoin only. There was nothing else.
Yep.
And after spending about 2 to 3 months researching it, I really had this eureka moment where I was like, if this works, we're going to rebuild our entire global financial infrastructure on this technology.
Wow.
And so I became very, very involved. I started allocating to the space. I started developing relationships to the space. Post law school, I actually built a business in St. Louis, where I'm originally from. There's a venture capital style business. So what our business model was is we were funding early stage technology in consumer product startups with like traditional venture investing. And then we also had what's called an accelerator program that we built out where we would help these early stage entrepreneurs. We give them seed capital, and then we run them through a 12-week program to help them scale up their business very quickly. And we had a bunch of these successful entrepreneurs that would come in and mentor them. So through the time building that company, I raised and managed multiple venture capital funds. We funded probably around 130 startups. We developed this really good access to deal flow with these emerging technologies around the world.
Yep.
And so corporations and larger entities used to contract us to find them startup technologies that would solve problem sets that they have.
Wow.
So through that, we built one in the energy technology space for a publicly traded company called Ameren. And the federal government has an agency called the NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. In the United States, they're like the arbiter of satellite imagery and geospatial intelligence. And so we were sourcing technologies for them to solve their problem sets. And then years ago, back in like the 2016-17 timeframe, my partner at the time, I really wanted to launch a Bitcoin and digital asset focused product. And she was at a different point in her career, and it wasn't something that she wanted to take the risk on at the time. And so eventually I was like, you know what, I have to do this. And so launched Off the Chain Capital, originally as a family office investment fund for close friends and family. And then over time, we actually opened it up to a wider base of investors and institutionalized it. And what we do with Off the Chain is very simple. We're taking Warren Buffett's traditional investment approach, where we try to find unique ways to find undervalued assets in the space, or finding ways to buy a dollar's worth of blockchain assets for 50 cents. It's very simple what our business model is. So we buy into private companies at a discount. We'll buy Bitcoin out of bankruptcy proceedings, giving us a big discount on Bitcoin. We'll buy other types of assets in the space. So that's kind of a high level overview of my background and how I got into what I'm doing now.
So, Brian, would you say that you're an underachiever, an overachiever based on your background? You're incredible.
I'd say that I do what makes me happy, and it's worked out really well for a long time.
I love that. I was going to ask you if you are Satoshi Nakamoto.
I am not. I am not Satoshi Nakamoto.
Because nobody knows who this person is or team of people, right? As you alluded to. But I want to get into, you got to help give a 101. I think our listeners are sort of that crypto curious crowd. And so I want you to give me the 101. What is Bitcoin? And why is it such a big deal? I'm seeing all these new news headlines over the last few days that it went over $100,000.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't even know why that's so important or what that means. But can you just give us a quick 101 on what is Bitcoin?
Yeah, the simplest way to understand Bitcoin in one sentence is that Bitcoin allows two parties anywhere in the world to exchange value over the internet as easy as sending an email. So if you
Wow.
think about sending an email, if I want to send an email from myself to you, I type it up, I send it. It's peer to peer, right? That email
Yep.
goes from my email account to yours. You get it, you receive the information. It's the same concept with Bitcoin, but instead of content, it's digital value. So
Got it.
think about if you could send money from myself to you with no bank, no Venmo, nothing like that. Like you could just do it peer to peer with no bank intermediary or no financial institution that could
Hmm.
censor or regulate or block that transaction. That's
Hmm.
what makes Bitcoin so powerful. As of today, there's no way to do that, where we're doing it in an open source way where two parties can exchange that value online. And so the best way to think about Bitcoin is really like a new digital monetary layer for our planet.
Wow.
Many years ago, the monetary layer for the planet was gold. Everything was backed by gold. And
Yeah.
that's since gone away. In the 70s, Richard Nixon, president, took us off the gold standard. And since then, our dollars have been backed by nothing. They've been backed by the full faith and credit in the US government, which has a trust level at an all-time low, right? So
Right.
the government can print money out of nowhere. With Bitcoin, you can't do that. The reason is because how Bitcoin is engineered is there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin ever created. And this
Okay.
is engineered into the system and can't be changed. And the
Hmm.
reason that's so important is it creates scarcity, right? Gold was the backing of our monetary system and money for many years because it was the scarcest asset on earth. Now Bitcoin is more scarce than gold. Bitcoin is the scarcest asset on earth. And
Wow.
there's a predictable schedule for how many Bitcoin get issued into circulation every single day. And now people, as they've adopted it over time, they're treating it like a digital gold. So they're holding it like a store of value. Or in some jurisdictions around the world where Bitcoin has become legal currency, you can use Bitcoin to buy your groceries or fill up your gas tank.
Wow.
And so
Well,
it's a really powerful new form of money and value.
that's amazing. And thank you for that intro. We were actually, I think, the first dermatology practice to actually offer Bitcoin as a payment option, which is super exciting. I can't say that I've used Bitcoin to buy anything myself, but for the average person, how can it be used? And I know you mentioned at the grocery store and places that it's accepted, but so it's different than regular money. It's not like having a credit card. Are there like Bitcoin ATMs? Like what are we talking here about the actual? I always think about, if everything's digital or it's in the cloud or it's this digital currency, what does that look and feel like when you go to buy something?
So it depends on where you live. And the reason
Okay.
I say that is because if you live in the United States, Bitcoin today is taxed as property. So you got to think
Ah,
of Bitcoin
interesting.
as an investment, like a digital store of value.
Got it.
If you buy Bitcoin and it goes up in value and you sell it, you have to pay a capital gain on that gain that you just made. So just like a
Okay.
stock, thing like that. In some jurisdictions, Bitcoin's laws have been rewritten, like El Salvador is an example. They now made Bitcoin legal tender. So it's not taxed as property and you can go buy
Got
your
it.
groceries, fill up your gas tank with it. I think eventually in the United States, they will recharacterize the tax on Bitcoin and
Hmm.
make it so Bitcoin's transactions are tax free. And they're like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's now in the government incoming
Yes.
administration with Trump. I think Bitcoin's the largest holding in his portfolio. He wants to make Bitcoin
Wow.
transactions free in the United States. The reason that's important is that if Bitcoin transactions become free, it becomes much more usable,
Right.
right? Like right now, you can't take Apple stock and go pay for your groceries with it, right? It's
Right.
impossible.
Right.
But if Bitcoin becomes tax free, it could become a new form, like a new medium of exchange for us to do things like that. But most people in the United States today, and most people around the world today, look at Bitcoin as a digital gold. It's a way to store value over a long time because it's scarce. We
Hmm.
know exactly how much it'll ever be created. It's also the most secure computer network that's ever been invented. And what I
Wow.
mean by that is that Bitcoin has never been hacked, the network itself.
That's
There's been
amazing.
there's been exchanges that hold Bitcoin that have been hacked, like somebody's password got leaked or somebody
Sure.
infiltrated it, and they got it that way. But the network itself, how it produces Bitcoin, how it operates, it's never been hacked. So it's the most secure network that exists today. But largely it really depends on in the US how it's taxed or other jurisdictions how it's taxed in terms of usability. And once those laws
Mhm.
change over time, it'll be much more usable as a medium of exchange.
And what are the risks? I mean, I know that earlier in the summer, I think the value of Bitcoin was in like the 60,000 range, and now it's over 100,000. And it seems like a lot of volatility in terms of the ups and downs. Is that the risk itself? Is just that there is volatility in this investment, or talk to me about that.
Yeah, so it's a very volatile asset class in general. You're going to have lots of ups and downs. And the reason that happens is because we're going through an adoption curve right now, like we did with the internet 20 plus years ago. And what the world is trying to figure out is, what is this technology worth? What is a technology worth that allows two parties anywhere to transact value with no bank across borders, right? And as we figure out what that's worth over time and people adopt it, it's going to be very volatile for the foreseeable future. But in the early days, people thought Bitcoin was priceless they thought Bitcoin was worthless until more and more people started to understood it. Today, I think Bitcoin is priceless because if we think about the internet, imagine if when the internet came out, it had a digital asset associated with it like Bitcoin. And every time the internet was used, that digital asset became more valuable. Today, if you would have bought that digital asset, you'd be worth a ton of money because the internet's become a lot, yes. Right? It's so integrated into our life. And so think about that like Bitcoin. Like imagine if you could buy a chunk of the software itself that allows that to happen in the long term. You've now created a asset that gives you value to hold that's unlike anything that's ever been created. And I think that's really how people should be looking at it, is that Bitcoin is the scarcest asset on earth. It's the first time in human history that it allows parties to exchange value cross borders in a uniform manner at the speed of light, because I can send a Bitcoin transaction to your wallet and it could be there instantly. And it allows for you to do something very unique in terms of an asset that basically no other asset allows for, which is self-custody. And what I mean by that is, if you have Bitcoin in an online account, like in an exchange, and I want to take it off the exchange, I can custody that digital asset on a device that's called a cold storage device. It looks like a little USB drive.
Yep.
So I could take $100 million of Bitcoin off the internet, put it on one of these devices, go to Italy, upload it back to the internet, and I'd have all that value with me.
Wow.
And we don't think about that a lot in the United States, but I'll give you a great example. There was a group of women that we helped that was based out of Afghanistan that were building websites that were getting paid in Bitcoin for many years. And when the Taliban came in and took over the regime, they shut off the banking access to everybody in the region. But the women had been collecting Bitcoin, so they took it offline. We helped them get out of Afghanistan. They went over and they actually got to a nonprofit in New York that helped them, and they were able to upload their Bitcoin back to the internet. They had all the value they created. That's a huge deal.
That is amazing.
That's an example.
That is a really cool story. One of my colleagues here was actually telling me some story about a guy who threw out his hard drive, and do you know about this person?
I don't know about this person, but I know people that this has happened to.
It had like millions and millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on this hard drive. And to your point, that is such the value is there. And it's almost like it's untouchable from some of these major government institutions that can so quickly shut down our bank accounts or otherwise. And
you actually bring up one thing to note on that. You bring up a really good point. People are often like, why wouldn't the government just shut down Bitcoin if it becomes too, and Bitcoin's very successful now. It's gaining adoption very quickly. The reason is because they can't. And what I mean by that is, the only way to shut Bitcoin down is to turn off the energy grid or knock out the telecommunications network, which takes the internet offline. And even if that were to happen, when it goes back online, Bitcoin continues to operate like it always has. You can't shut it down. It's impossible.
I love that. So Brian, let's say I have no Bitcoin and I'm a 101 person. I'm just learning about it. Is now the time to start investing in Bitcoin? Am I too late for someone who's sort of like a late adopter of Bitcoin? Where do I start? Where do I begin?
Yeah, so you're not too late. It's actually very, very early. So people look at the price of Bitcoin, they see it's 100,000 and they're like, oh, I missed the boat on this. That couldn't be further from the truth. And the reason that is because, like I noted before, there's 21 million Bitcoin that'll ever be created. There's 8 billion people on the planet. The vast majority of the world will never even have the opportunity to own a single Bitcoin. And so the price of where it's at today, although it seems expensive, it is not relative to where it's going to go in the future. So, I mean, my projection, and this is not investment advice by any means, but if you look at the market mechanics of what's happening, I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin is somewhere between $300,000 and $2 million over the next 12 to 15 months.
That's insane.
And it seems insane. But the reason I'm saying that is because The best time to be exposed to the space is in a 12 to 18 month window after what's called the Bitcoin halving. And the
Right.
Bitcoin halving happens every 4 years that cuts the daily supply in half. So right now we're in that. It just happened on April 19th of this year. And in addition to that, now we're seeing country governments looking to build Bitcoin strategic reserves and hold it like we've had with gold for many years. So if the US government owns 212,000 Bitcoin today.
Okay.
If they go and they issue legislation to buy 800,000 Bitcoin to give them about 1 million in total, that's a huge amount of buying pressure for an already scarce asset. Then when the US does it, it'll create a geopolitical game theory race where Russia will do it, China will do it, Saudi will do it, the UAE will do it. Everyone's going to compete to buy this Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. And then we're looking at opportunity for price performance in the future that's really going to be inconceivable. It's going to probably blow people's minds. But if you think about it from a very basic perspective, is that there's 21 million ever created and there's 8 billion people on the planet. If you can own a piece of that, and at some point, I believe the vast majority of our planet will own some chunk of the Bitcoin network, the opportunity long-term is significant, in my opinion.
I feel so encouraged right now. So
very good
for all that information. Okay. So I just want to take a little bit of a pivot here for we have a lot of young people in our business, and there's a lot of young people that are listening. Can you give, just with all of your career, knowledge, beginners some advice on investing responsibly? I always, we have a financial investment firm that we work with personally, and how do people know when they should have an investment company to work with or somebody like you? And how do you invest responsibly, not just in Bitcoin, but generally speaking?
I think it's always important that people invest in things that they understand. And that's why a lot of people haven't invested in crypto historically, because they haven't spent the time to educate themselves on it. But the younger demographic of people are becoming much more excited about it, and they are researching it, right? So the vast majority of the people that have exposure to digital assets are an age demographic that's going to be younger traditionally than some of the people in the older age demographic, because they've spent the time to understand it. They're more adept to technology. In terms of investing responsibly, I think one thing that's really important in the investment space that a lot of people miss, and this is regardless what you invest in, there's a difference between price and value. And what I mean by that is that, but we'll use the crypto space as an example. Bitcoin, like we noted, is over $100,000 as of today. It seems really expensive, right? There's like 20,000 different crypto assets. Some of these crypto assets trade for fractions of a cent. So some people will look at that and say, oh, this one's real cheap. I'm going to put some money in it because maybe it'll go up and I'll make some money off it. But that particular crypto asset may have zero value. It could be totally speculative. Right. Whereas even though there's this one called Bitcoin that's worth 100,000 today, I mean, it has such value, even though it's expensive, that it's going to continue to grow many, many years into the future. And so when you're doing research on how to invest, make sure you really dig down into what is the use case, the functionality of what it is that you're investing in, because there's such a big difference between price and value. And another great example that we all use every day for the most part is Amazon. Back after the dot-com bubble burst, Jeff Bezos was in an interview because the stock price of Amazon went from $100 down to $2. And they were saying, what happened to your stock? What's going on? This and that. And Jeff Bezos says, we looked at it and we looked at our company, and our stock price dropped 98%, but our company was growing faster than it ever had. We had better unit economics. We had more customers. We had less customers leaving us. So all of our metrics were increasing. So he goes, what I've learned is that the stock price is not the company, and the company is not the stock price.
Interesting.
And so because of that, you have to really understand price and value and dig down on things that you're interested in. And I always tell people, like, whatever the area is that you're interested in, really double down on your research there and try to become an expert in that thing, because then it'll help you with your investing. And you can't be an expert in everything. So don't think you're going to be an expert in real estate and stocks and crypto. Like pick one thing that you really like and dedicate your energy there.
I like that. Better. I like that strategy. And then do you have any advice on, if you're in a position where you have some extra money to invest or things like that, how do you not overinvest or end up shooting yourself in the foot with, investing too much of your money in something, putting too many eggs in one basket? Any advice on that end?
Yeah, so I have a very contrarian viewpoint on this question.
Okay.
Most people and almost all financial advisors will tell you need to diversify your portfolio to protect your risk and protect your downside. That's the most common thing you're going to hear from most financial advisors. I 100% disagree with that.
Okay.
My opinion is that you find something that you really believe in and you're going to work hard to make it happen, or you're going to do your research, like I said before, and you put all your eggs in that basket, and then you make sure and you watch that basket very, very closely. So like for me, as an example, I was very blessed to learn about Bitcoin super early. And I had this light bulb moment. And it was in the phase where Bitcoin could have failed 1,000 different times. But for me, it was like, I don't know what it is. I had this intuitive feeling this is going to work. I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket and I'm going to do my best to make it work. And unfortunately, over time, I mean, we're still very early, in my opinion. I've been in this space for 12 years, but we're still very early. And I think Bitcoin is going to be massively successful. But that's the case of anything. Like if you start a business and it's something you believe in and you're kind of putting all your eggs in that basket by investing in your own business, you work like crazy to make it happen. And Warren Buffett even has a famous quote that says this, and he's one of the most successful investors of all time, which is put all your eggs in one basket and watch that basket very closely. And what I think most financial advisors get wrong is that when you're in a younger portion of your life and you have the ability to take more risk before you have more responsibilities with family and children and things of that nature, you want to be able to take risks on things you care about, that you're passionate about. Otherwise, you're probably going to regret it later in life. And so if you work really, really hard and you fail at something, that's okay. I can't tell people how many businesses I've started that failed, but I just kept starting businesses and kept doing stuff. So it's failure is part of the process to success. And with that, so I just note, like, if you, in the early days of your investing career, I would find something that you can become very concentrated in. And then when you do very well in life, that's when you start diversifying. And I think most financial advisors get wrong, because the difference is that once you have a lot of wealth, you diversify to keep it, right? You diversify to keep that wealth and let it grow slowly over time. But in the early days, if you really want to attain large, vast amounts of wealth, my opinion is that you have to go really, really hard at one or two very specific things. And that's how you, there's a difference between generating wealth and preserving wealth.
And it sounds like it's never too early to start, right? So if there's anybody listening that is like, I don't know anything about investing, today could be the day just to start.
Here's a funny story. The founder of KFC, Colonel Sanders, I think he started that company when he was 65 or 67 years old. And that's in KFC, you know?
Yeah, that's how old. I did not know that.
I believe he was a naval chef for many, many years. And he created this specific type of, chicken that everybody really liked. And then he, afterwards,
that's incredible.
He was way, way older when he started KFC. And look at KFC's become
I mean, everybody knows KFC. I lived in Japan for a stint of time and they had KFCs in Japan. I was like, what world am I in right now? This is so weird. But that is amazing. Well, Brian, I don't want to keep you too long here, but the takeaways are it's never too early to invest. Bitcoin has a future beyond what it is today, and to not be shy. And I encourage everybody listening to this podcast to look up Brian, listen to his seminars and all the research he's done around this category. And then don't put all your eggs in one basket, except do put your eggs in one basket when you're starting out, and make sure that you're passionate about investing in something. Any other key takeaways or advice that you want to share?
The last thing I'll share with everybody is that, this is very important as you're like in the earlier parts of your career. Never let your credentials define what you want to do with your life. And what I mean by that is a lot of people are like, I went to school and did X, so I need to go do X, but X doesn't make me happy, right? Like for example, my academic background is I got an undergraduate degree in English and sociology. Then I went to law school. Then I learned about Bitcoin. Then I went to technology investing, and now I have a cryptocurrency investment firm. So like what I'm doing today didn't even exist when I was in school. I created that over time. And so I note that because a lot of people get stuck in these societal programmatic patterns of I need to do X, Y, or Z because that's what my academic background is. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I'm a big believer that if you and this is different for every person, if you intuitively enjoy something and that's what you want to do, put all your energy there to the best of your ability, and the universe kind of opens up doors to allow that to happen when you're doing it from a good place. And so I don't care what someone's background is. If you're a lawyer and you want to go be an artist, go do it. Figure out how to do it. Just make it happen. So that's probably the biggest takeaway.
I love that advice. Brian, you've left me inspired and you've left me very crypto curious. So I feel like I need to get on the phone with some people and start making some moves here. But it's been a really great pleasure to speak with you. And we're very honored that you took the time to talk to us today.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
This is the Daily Dose of Derm. Stay inspired and stay curious.